Alrighty. Hello and welcome. My name is Cindy Freeman, and this is Brad Lawrence, who's going to be running your webinar for today. I'll be your stage manager. I just wanted to say hi and welcome you. I'm going to disappear into the background in just a moment and leave you with the fantastic master of storytelling, Brad Lawrence.
Great. Welcome to this webinar, everyone. It's called Bringing Stories to Life Through Scenic Detail. Story Studio is doing a number of these free webinars covering different aspects of storytelling. The first one we did was storytelling for building connection. We recently did a couple on, storytelling, prompting for storytelling and sort of best practices for storytelling. I do know we're going to be having one on structure coming up pretty soon. I think that's with Julia Whitehouse, if I'm not mistaken. So we're kind of breaking things down a little bit and kind of doing these short webinars, sort of focusing in on certain aspects of the storytelling craft. And this one today, I am focusing on really two areas, but one mainly, and that is we divide the actual content of a story, the words you use. Here at the Story Studio, we divide those into sort of two categories. One being narrative summary, and one being scenic detail. Now, narrative summary is kind of the architecture of a story. It's the framework. It is the information you need to have to place yourself in time and space. It's not necessarily very flowery or entirely descriptive, but it's important information because, if you start out saying it's Texas, it's 1983, that's narrative summary. You're putting us in a place, you're giving us a time, we know that information, it's important information to have, but it's not the bells and whistles. The bells and whistles come in when you get to scenic detail. Scenic detail are the descriptive words you use to make a story come alive and feel like a lived experience for the listener, right? And my favorite example of differentiating narrative summary from scenic detail is, say you were going to tell a story about being in a grocery store that gets held up at gunpoint, right? When telling that story, you're not going to describe your apartment, the journey from your apartment to the grocery store, every dog you passed, every baby you saw between your front door and the grocery store, the make and model of every single car on the street. Because those are not necessarily germane to the intense action or the intense drama, the intense emotions of the story. We need to know that we're not in your apartment. We need to know maybe you want to tell us we've gone down the street and across the way and now we're in the grocery store. Something very simple like that, just to give a sense of motion and a sense of movement through space. But you're not really digging into the colors and the sounds and that kind of thing. Now, once you're in the grocery store and the guy bursts in with a gun and starts waving it around and saying this is a holdup, now we get to the time for scenic detail, because this is the moment when time slows down, right? Things get more intense. You are now more emotionally engaged, and you need to bring us into that emotional experience. And how you do that is by slowing down the storytelling itself and filling us in on all of the sort of sensory details that are now coming at you and making that situation vivid for you. Because suddenly in a situation like that, you yourself are taking things in on the journey from your front door to the grocery store. Maybe you're lost in thought. Maybe you're thinking about any number of things. Maybe you're composing a story in your head for that night's open mic. Anything else might be distracting you. But in that moment when the guy bursts in with the gun and shouts, "This is a holdup," suddenly your attention becomes focused, time slows down, and you are taking details in a way that you weren't on your journey to the grocery store. What color is the gun? Is the gun silver or is the gun black? Where is the gun pointing? Is it pointing at the ceiling, or is it pointing at the woman behind the counter, or is it pointing at you? The woman behind the counter, what is she doing? Is she panicking and freaking out, or is this her third hold up for the week? Right? The woman behind you, the old woman you didn't notice before all this started, Is she passing out? Did she faint? Is she attacking the robber? What is she doing? Right? All of these things. Now you are taking these things in. You're taking in like the sound the door made when he hit it, when he came in. What's the sound of his voice? Is he growling commands, or is he shouting? Does he seem hyped up, or is he a professional? Right? All of these things make that moment come alive and feel vivid and lived for whoever's listening to the story. Now, what are the tools that we use to make those moments feel that way, feel vivid and alive? Those tools are what we call scenic detail. Scenic detail is described using the 6 senses. You'll notice that I added one. The 6 senses are these: sight, sound, smell, taste, feeling body, and thinking mind. Right? Now, the first 4, they seem fairly self-explanatory: sight, sound, smell, taste. But there are some nuances that it's important to be aware of. For instance, sight. Sight's kind of the big marquee sense. It's a sense that we all sort of lead with in so many ways. We're very visually oriented people much of the time. But sight is actually not the way the world first comes to you. Your early warning system, the thing that sort of brings the world to you first and foremost, the quickest, is sound, actually. Because unless you're looking directly at the door when the guy bursts in and shouts, "This is a holdup," chances are how you're going to become aware of him first is the sound of him hitting that door, the door crashing open, and him shouting, right? That gets your attention. Sound is the early warning system. And then you will look towards him, right? Sight is for focused attention. Right? Sight is when you need to really bear down on something and figure something out. There's, of course, nuance to these, and their roles can switch up from time to time depending on the situation, but it's kind of in a general sense. Smell and taste. Smell and taste are very intimate emotions. They're also, smell especially is very tied to memory. Oftentimes, these things will come into play with things like family memories, things around the holidays, food sense, that kind of stuff. The smell of the perfume your mother used, or the cologne your dad wore, that kind of thing. These things can take you back to a specific moment in time. And they're, of course, because you take these things in, taste and smell, they're very, very, they can be very intimate, and they can be very sort of shocking. We had one storyteller who was telling a story about being in a very brutal car accident. She actually wasn't in the accident. She came on the scene immediately after it happened, and she talked about the taste of the sort of iron, coppery taste of blood on the air, right? And it's it gets you, you know? That is... I'm looking for another word besides intimate, because I've used intimate like 8 times, but you know what I mean. It's like, so let's see here. Now let's get to the other ones, the more specific ones. Feeling body and thinking mind. Now, why feeling body as opposed to just touch? Touch definitely is a part of this. Tactile sensations, so if something's rough or smooth or, hot or cold, like all of that is part of it. But also we're talking about emotions. We call them feelings for a reason, because emotions live in the body, right? And they can be very, very specific. There are a sort of set of physiological responses to emotions that kind of are pretty, generally speaking, universal. Things like when you get embarrassed and your face goes hot. When you're scared and the hair stands up on your arms. When you're nervous and your stomach tightens. All of these things are kind of a shorthand language for letting people know, like, this is how I felt. My stomach went tight. And they're like, I've been there. I've had that. My stomach's gone tight as well. There's a weird sound outside and the hair stood up in the back of my neck. And everybody says, oh yes, I got that. The hair stood up in the back of my neck. I understand that. So that's kind of, it sort of forms a universal language. but it can also be very specific. My favorite example of this is often the grossest example of this. I had a guy I was teaching. He had a story about he was raised in London, but his family was from Ghana, and his grandparents had a farm in Ghana. And so, he didn't get to see them very often. He didn't get to go to Ghana very often. But every 4 years, he would go back and visit his grandparents. One year, when he was very young, he went back and they had a new litter of puppies, and he really bonded with this one female pup. And that, for the summer that he was spending on his grandparents' farm, that became his dog, right? And so he goes back to London. 4 years go by. He goes back to Ghana. And now that pup is now old enough to have puppies of her own. And she does while he's there. And one of the puppies is stillborn. I don't know if any of you know what dogs often do with stillborn puppies, but this is what dogs do with stillborn puppies. Often they eat them. And he talked about hearing the crunch of the tiny bones in this dog, this beloved companion of his, doing this horrible and repulsive thing, the crunch of the tiny bones in her jaws. And he said this, and the entire class reacted how I'm sure all of you are reacting right now. Hang with me. I don't see the numbers going down. That's good. Stay with me. But when we finished, I said, okay, that moment, where that feeling of repulsion and horror, where did you feel that? And he said, in my stomach. And I said, did your stomach go tight like a fist? And he said, no, liquid. It's very specific. And it really brings that moment home. I have not forgotten it. I taught this guy 5 years ago now, and I have not forgotten that detail of his story. So that's feeling body. Now let's move on to thinking mind. When you are telling a story, we are on a ride along in your brain. You are our point of view. So you have to let us into your brain and let us into your mind, into the driver's seat. You have to tell us what you're feeling, what you're thinking, the internal debates you're having with yourself. What are you thinking but not saying out loud? What are you saying out loud, and how does that differ from what you're thinking? What is someone else saying to you? Dialogue falls into this category. What is someone else saying to you? You're hearing, and what are you thinking about it but not saying? All of these things, the little debates you have with yourself, the little arguments where you're trying to make a decision about something, all of these things fall under thinking mind. And this is perhaps one of the most important and most overlooked parts of storytelling. You can't assume that we just know what your experience is. It's your job to tell us your experience. That's what storytelling is all about. Putting us in your mind and making your lived experience an experience we're living along with you and making it feel like it's happening to us in real time. Thinking mind is one of the most crucial aspects of that. Giving us those internal debates, those internal dialogues, and the dialogues you're having with other people and what you're thinking about those dialogues. That puts you in a time and a place and a space and makes you a living person interacting with the world, right? That is crucial. Now, let's talk about exercises, ways to sort of get you in the mode of thinking in terms of scenic detail. My absolute favorite exercise for this is one I call just describe a room. It's just that simple. You are going to pick a room from some point in your life, a room that was important to you in some way, some period in your life had some kind of impact on you, and you're just going to describe that room in as much detail, using as many senses as you possibly can. The room that I always use for this exercise as an example is the front room, the office room of my grandparents' cheap roadside motel. My grandparents owned a roadside motel in the Ozarks, and I stayed there for many a summer when I was a kid. And the front office room, it was a completely wood-paneled room, very dark wood paneling. There were two doors. One door led to the outside, to the gravel parking lot, where you would hear people like pull into the gravel parking lot. You could hear the crunch of their wheels on the gravel, and you could hear them get out of their car and slam their car door and stomp up those front steps into the room. There was another door that led to the actual house where my grandparents lived. It was attached to the office. They were just back there. So if someone showed up in the middle of the night and rang the bell, this sort of buzzard that went off out front, it would wake my grandfather up, and he could come tumbling out of his bedroom and into the front office and sign someone in. He signed them in at this counter. So from like a countertop, it was about eye level for me. I was about 6 or 7 years old, and it was like eye level, so I could see just everything was sort of up there. There was a ledger up there. People signed in their cars, and the ledger smelled like a Bible. That old parchment paper scent. And people would sign in there, and they'd leave their license plate numbers. So I didn't quite understand why that was important at the time. There was the carpet was kind of this brown, nubby carpet, sort of a color that's deliberately sort of designed not to show the dirt that people had brought in from the outside world, brought in from the highway, essentially. Behind my grandfather, there was a wood set of cubbies where all of the keys for the various rooms were, and he'd sign someone in, fish out a key for a vacant room, and give it to him, and it always kind of made this jangling sound. There was behind his head a huge set of steer horns, and hanging from one of the steer horns was a pair of gold boxing gloves that was a gag gift that my mom and uncles and aunt had gotten my grandparents for their 50th wedding anniversary, because 50 is gold. There was across from the counter, there was a 7-Up machine. It was kind of one of the old school 7-Up machines where you'd put in a quarter and you'd open the door, and like you were just on your honor because all the sodas were right there. You're just on your honor to take just the one you'd paid for. And right next to where my grandfather signed people in and out, there was a window. And out that window, you could see the sign where the big motel sign outside, and next to that window was a little panel that had 2 switches. And these 2 switches were the most important thing in the world to me, because these 2 switches, one switch turned the sign off and on, the entire neon sign, and one switch worked just the no in the no vacancy sign, right? So you turn the entire sign on, and if there was a vacancy, you leave the no turned off. But if the motel was full up, then you'd turn on the no, right? So there's no vacancy and people just drive on by. That is, I think, my grandparents' office at their cheap motel. And whenever I do that exercise, I am right back in that room. And you can do this. I like to do it with a room as a way of sort of keeping those scenic details skills sharp. You can kind of do it for anything, and you kind of challenge yourself to do it in certain, like do it with people. You know, if someone has dialogue, if someone plays an important central role in a story you're telling, you know, start thinking about, you know, what did their voice sound like? Did they have a clear, steady voice? Was it gravelly? Was it a weak voice? Did it have a timbre to it? What did it do? When they had a conversation with you, did they look at you? Did they look at the floor? Did they look away from you? What was their body language in the conversation? Were they nervous? Were they jittery? Were they turned away from you? Were they turned directly towards you? What was their physical stature like? Were they bigger than you? Were they smaller than you? Did they seem stronger than you? Were they intimidating, or did you have the physical advantage? You know? Verbal tics. Did they say a lot? Did they like I do too much of the time? Did they have physical gestures that you noticed? Were they snappy? You know, did they clap their hands for emphasis? What was their verbal body language like? You can apply this to pretty much anything that plays a central role in a story. You're not necessarily going to use every detail you come up with, but this exercise sort of gets you in that mode of thinking about how things look and feel and sound and smell, and sort of describing that in as many ways as you can. And then from there, you have this palette of things that you can pick out. You can use those details as you construct a story. I left out, about my grandparents' motel. The smell part, the most distinct thing I remember is when I'd get a 7-Up as a kid, and there's a little like bottle opener hinged to the side of the vending machine, and you'd pop it open, and that splash, that mist of lemon lime scent. It was cold and it would hit your nose. It's that kind of stuff. All of that is a palette that I can draw from. I have told many stories of my grandparents' motel, and I draw from that palette whenever I want to construct those stories. Just to go back real quick, before I bring Cindy back on to talk about Q&A, I just want to hit real fast while we're doing this. I don't want to, because Scenic Detail is so important, and describing those moments when time stands still is so crucial, it can lead you to kind of discount the importance of narrative summary. Narrative summary is crucial for putting you in a time and a place. It's important, and sometimes saying things in a blank way can give things added emphasis, especially if you have a story we've described a lot of things, but you need someone to have a very clear understanding, you're in a specific emotional place, you need to make it known. Sometimes a blank statement like, I wasn't buying it. I didn't believe him. That kind of thing. Now it's very clear, and it gives it the emphasis it needs. It's sort of cutting through things and saying, this is where I'm at, right? Also, narrative summary, don't shirk on the detail. There's a story I tell where I talk about I'm doing a moving job, and the moving job is actually on the 3rd floor of this building. And I say, I rang the guy buzzed me in, we went up to the 3rd floor. It takes just as much time, or just as little time to say we went upstairs, as it does to say we went up to the 3rd floor. But making a specific choice, even that kind of specific choice, it just gives you one extra moment that costs you no extra time that you can just sort of fit into the narrative summary that makes that world just a little bit more real. Because people's brains are going to go, 3rd floor, got it. And they're going to fill that in with a 3rd floor they've been on at some point in their life because it's a specific detail, right? So even when you're constructing the narrative summary parts of your story, look for the details that take no time. Look for the places where details will cost you as little time as the generalization, and go for the detail. Got it? Let's bring Cindy back.
Hey there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you see me?
I can see you. That was my fast hit on Scenic Detail.
All right. I have you spotlighted. I must unspotlight you.
Great.
Okay. I don't know what's going on.
Are you trying to get me to gallery view? Is that the plan?
That's what I'm trying to do. That's so funny.
If it's just back and forth, it's not the biggest deal in the world. We want to see if there's any questions.
I do. Well, actually, we do have one really good question. So while I futz around with the video, Anastasia had a great question, which is, when describing a scene in a story, sometimes I spend too much time in that description, which I think is necessary, but how do I avoid that?
How do you avoid spending too much time on, one way is to give yourself a time limit. Say to yourself, I'm going to tell this story in, say it's a 7-minute story normally, make it a 4-minute story. And then start trying to get into that 4 minutes. And that will sort of teach you, you can edit things out of those details, you can edit those, you can start to sort of figure out what is the most important, what are the most crucial details that make this feel alive, make it feel important, make it feel, get the emotion across. What do I absolutely have to have, and what push come to shove can I live without, right? Sort of making yourself do it can make you make hard choices. To get any more specific than that, I'd probably need to know what the actual story was. In a coaching session, I would probably have very specific points. You can lose this and keep this and that kind of stuff. Also, it's always important to sort of break down, what are you trying to communicate? What does this section need to tell the audience? What do they need to know when they walk away from this section of the story? What do they absolutely have to know? And then you can sort of take all the details you have and kind of weigh them against that goal of communicating that essential thing, getting that task completed. And you can sort of weigh out like, well, this one does the job better than this one. So this is the one that's got to go. And sometimes you will have the most beautifully crafted piece of language, absolute poetry, just poetry. And you will have another detail that is not even nearly the shiny bauble that that bit of poetry is. But that less shiny bauble will get the job done better than your poetry. And you will have to lose the fancier bit of language that you're oh so proud of because the other thing does the job better. The other thing makes the person feel is more relevant to the kind of emotion you're trying to get across. And you've just got to be willing to make those hard choices.
Cool. Any other questions that might be out there? Feel free to put them in the Q&A or just stick them in the chat.
Let's see here.
Yeah, while people might be typing away, Anastasia, with my thought on that as well is, you know, if you have a 10-minute story, it's a good exercise to practice the 5-minute story. If you have a 5-minute story, practice the 3-minute, because in the end, it's about scenic detail or narrative summary. Any story can be told in the same way. You can follow that arc completely in narrative summary and get maybe a story told in 2 minutes. You're just not going to grab anybody. So if you are able to sort of go back and forth, then you can figure out, well, what was needed and what can I do without. Anything else?
I don't think so. Apparently, I was extraordinarily clear and concise.
I actually do think you pretty much covered it all really well.
Right, good.
There's a couple things I want to promote. If you have any questions, throw them in there while I'm promoting some stuff. First of all, I don't know if you all know about this, but there is the Story Studio open mic. And the Story Studio open mic is open to anyone who's taken a class at the Story Studio, but we've recently opened it up. So a couple of people, we always give some slots to newbies and people who've never taken a class with us. I'm putting that in the chat function right now. If you want to attend, it is tonight, and I am going to be the MC. It's at 8:00 p.m. Eastern time. Email admin@thestorystudio.org, put open mic in the subject box. If you want to practice a 5-minute story, it's a great place to do that. Brad, you look like you have a question.
Oh, well, someone is asking a question in the Q&A function. We don't normally use the Q&A function because it's kind of hard to see it, whereas the chat function like gives it to us right away.
But thanks for pointing that out. Yeah.
The question is there a replay to this session? And I assume you mean a video. We videotape all of these and make them available. Is that correct?
That is correct. So once that video is edited and up, I will send the link to everybody who has signed up, including the people who missed it, because there's a handful of people, there usually is, who I'm sure something came up and couldn't make it. Cool. So Celeste, yes, the answer is yes. The other things I'm going to promote are, hold on, if you want to take a class, we have a coupon code. We have classes going on with the Story Studio all the time. I have a coupon code for 15% off, which is learn online during the time of COVID. All of our classes are online, but the good news on that is you are able to, you know, take the class from anywhere in the world and meet people from all over this great, fantastic planet.
I think the next class of mine, the next class coming up is actually one of mine. I think it's the Storytelling for Business.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
And finally, a couple other things. Watch this. I'm going to just throw them all in here. The next webinar after this is going to be Kevin Allison's Storytelling for Performance Masterclass. That's 90 minutes, and he is the one who trained all of us. He's fabulous. That's where you go to enroll. And if you have any questions or want to look into one-on-one coaching or anything, or corporate classes, which we do, reach out to me at cindy@thestorystudio.org. Oh, I think there might be one more question. Nope. We already answered it.
Yes.
It's answered. All right.
All right.
Thank you all for attending. Brad, anything you want to say to close this up?
No, I hope it was helpful. I hope people enjoy the exercise suggestion. I really recommend it. You will go places in your own personal history that you have not been in a very long time when you start, you know, breaking it down to describing very specific, discrete things like rooms and, you know, relatives and that kind of stuff. You'll really sort of you'll find new things by doing that exercise.
All right. Bye, you all. Maybe I'll see some of you at the open mic tonight. And if not, I hope to see you sometime soon. Stay well, stay safe. Thank you, Celeste, for telling us it's wonderful. That actually means a lot. Makes me feel good. And yeah.
Someone missed the coupon code. Yeah, we posted it above, but it's Learn Online.
Yes,
I
you
don't
got
know
it.
if I'm typing anything. Okay. Did you find it?
It's very easy to find these things.
Well, it's Learn Online is the coupon code itself. It's just like there you go.
There you go.
Yeah. Oh, there was something popped into my head and now it is gone. It was just like that. It was there and now it's
on one of the spaceships.
I'll never get it back. I'm sure it was crucial. I'm sure it's like the very thing everyone on here came to find out and needed to know. It's not. Sorry, guys.
On that note, once we have those videos up, I will send that to you. If Brad,
that's what it was. The videos are going to take time because we have to add in like title cards and outro cards and that kind of stuff. So there's a little bit of lag time in getting the videos to everyone. So that's it.
But it should be about a week. All right, that's it. We are done. You are amazing, Brad. You are amazing.
Thank
Everybody
you.
who signed up, and have a fabulous day. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.